Space is a realm of endless wonders, but every so often it delivers a surprise so bewildering that it shakes the foundations of everything we think we know. This time, the cosmos has delivered one of its most perplexing enigmas yet. As Comet 3I/Atlas, a mysterious interstellar traveler, makes its steady approach toward the orbit of Mars, scientists worldwide have been on high alert, tracking its progress and studying every scrap of data it sends back. What they weren't prepared for, however, was the sudden and inexplicable appearance of multiple unidentified objects trailing the comet. Objects that seem to be multiplying as they move through space, defying all known scientific principles. It began quietly, almost unremarkably. Months ago, when 3I/Atlas was first spotted hurtling through the void, most astronomers saw it as another exciting opportunity to study an interstellar object, a rare visitor from outside our solar system, much like the famous Oumuamua in 2017. Telescopes across Earth, from Hawaii's Pan-STARRS Observatory to Chile's Atacama Desert Arrays, were immediately directed toward it. Early observations showed that 3I/Atlas was moving along a highly unusual trajectory, one that suggested it had entered our solar system at an immense speed before slowing slightly as it passed through the gravitational influence of Jupiter. At first, everything seemed straightforward. Scientists expected the comet to behave according to established models: sublimation of frozen gases as it neared the sun, a visible coma forming around its nucleus, and perhaps a dramatic tail stretching millions of kilometers into space. But as 3I/Atlas drew closer to Mars, something entirely unexpected happened. Observatories began to report strange anomalies in their data, small flickering points of light surrounding the comet, almost like fragments breaking away. Yet these weren't behaving like natural debris. Instead of dispersing randomly, the objects seemed to organize themselves, moving in complex, synchronized patterns. At first, many dismissed these reports as simple equipment malfunctions or observational errors. After all, space is full of noise, false signals caused by cosmic rays, background radiation, or even tiny fluctuations in the instruments themselves. But when multiple independent observatories across different continents began reporting the same phenomenon, the scientific community was forced to pay attention. These weren't random specks of light, they were something unprecedented. As days turned to weeks, the situation grew even stranger. The objects didn't just maintain their formation, they began to multiply. High-resolution imaging from NASA's Deep Space Network revealed that where there had once been a handful of strange dots, there were now dozens. A week later, there were hundreds. And yet, despite this dramatic increase in numbers, the objects remained perfectly aligned, almost as though they were being controlled by some unseen intelligence or natural force beyond our comprehension. This discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific world. NASA, ESA, and other leading space agencies immediately convened emergency meetings to discuss what this could mean. Theories began to emerge, ranging from the mundane to the extraordinary. Some scientists suggested that these could be simple ice fragments, breaking off from the comet as it heated up, reflecting sunlight in a way that made them appear more organized than they really were. Others proposed that they might be microscopic dust clusters, held together by electrostatic forces, creating the illusion of structured movement. But there were those who weren't satisfied with such explanations. A growing faction of astronomers began to whisper about a far more unsettling possibility: that these objects might not be natural at all. The level of organization and the apparent ability to multiply suggested a phenomenon that defied all known laws of physics. Could it be that 3I/Atlas was carrying something with it, something deliberately engineered? While the scientific community debated, the general public remained largely unaware. Most news outlets were focused on earthly concerns, politics, climate events, and the usual cycle of daily headlines. Only a handful of niche science blogs and astronomy forums reported on the anomalies, treating them as little more than curiosities. That changed, however, when a set of high-definition images leaked from a European observatory showing the objects in staggering detail. The images were haunting. Against the black backdrop of space, the objects appeared as glimmering geometric shapes, each one reflecting light in a way that seemed almost artificial. They weren't smooth like ice crystals, nor jagged like rocky debris. Instead, they had intricate patterns etched across their surfaces, patterns that looked disturbingly like the kind of symmetrical designs one might expect from advanced technology. When these images hit the internet, they went viral within hours, sparking a storm of speculation across social media platforms. Words like alien, probe, and invasion began to dominate trending hashtags. NASA and ESA scrambled to contain the situation, issuing carefully worded statements urging the public not to jump to conclusions. They emphasized that while the images were real, there was no evidence to suggest anything extraterrestrial. Yet their very caution only fueled the flames of suspicion. If these objects were truly harmless, why did the agency seem so reluctant to share their data openly? As the debate raged, one thing became clear. 3I/Atlas was no ordinary interstellar visitor. Its approach toward Mars had become the most closely watched astronomical event in recent history, with telescopes, satellites, and even the Hubble Space Telescope locked onto it around the clock. And with each passing day, the mystery deepened. On a crisp evening in late October, an international team of scientists gathered at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. The mood in the control room was tense. For weeks, they had been working around the clock to track the comet and its accompanying swarm. Now, as a new batch of data streamed in from the James Webb Telescope, they hoped for clarity. Instead, what they saw left them stunned.
The data revealed that the objects weren't just multiplying, they were adapting. Their formations were shifting in ways that suggested a kind of collective behavior. At times, they arranged themselves into long, spiraling chains that wrapped around the comet like tendrils. At other moments, they spread out into vast, symmetrical grids, almost like a fleet of tiny spacecraft maneuvering in perfect unison. Even more baffling, the objects seemed to respond to external stimuli. When a burst of solar wind hit the area, they reconfigured almost instantly, shielding themselves and the comet's core from the oncoming particles. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a leading astrophysicist at JPL, stared at the screen in disbelief. This shouldn't be possible," she whispered. Around her, the room fell silent. For years, Elena had been at the forefront of comet research, but nothing in her experience could explain what she was witnessing. "If these were just ice fragments, they'd be scattered by the solar wind," she said, her voice trembling. "But they're not scattering, they're reacting." Her colleague, Dr. Marcus Lee, leaned forward, his eyes wide. "Are you suggesting they're alive?" The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. No one wanted to answer, but the implication was clear. If these objects were some form of life, albeit unlike anything we'd ever encountered, the ramifications would be staggering. It would mean that life didn't just exist beyond Earth. It might thrive in the cold, airless depths of interstellar space. Before anyone could respond, a new alert sounded. A fresh data packet had arrived from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, which had been tasked with providing close-up observations as 3I ATAZ passed near the red planet. The images displayed on the main screen showed something even more shocking. The objects weren't just trailing the comet anymore, they were breaking away, scattering across space in all directions, and some of them were heading straight toward Mars. Panic rippled through the room. If these objects were alive, or worse, if they were some form of autonomous machine, there was no telling what they might do upon reaching the planet's surface. The possibilities were as terrifying as they were endless. Could they contaminate Mars with unknown biological material? Could they interfere with the delicate instruments of the rovers currently exploring the planet? Or in the darkest scenario, could they pose a threat to future human missions? The scientists knew they needed answers fast. A decision was made to redirect several probes and satellites to focus exclusively on tracking the objects. Even NASA considered launching an emergency mission to intercept one of them, though the logistics of such a move were daunting. Time was short, and every moment that passed brought the swarm closer to Mars. Meanwhile, the public frenzy continued to grow. Conspiracy theorists flooded online forums with wild claims, while news outlets scrambled to keep up with the rapidly evolving story. Some compared the event to the early days of the Oumuamua discovery, when speculation about alien technology had run rampant. Others warned that humanity was on the brink of a first contact scenario, one that could change the course of history forever. Through it all, 3I ATAZ continued its relentless journey through the cosmos, an enigmatic harbinger of secrets yet to be revealed. And as the mysterious objects multiplied and spread, one chilling question lingered in the minds of scientists and laypeople alike. What exactly was coming toward us, and why now? As the comet drew ever closer to Mars, the world held its breath. The next few weeks would either bring unprecedented discovery or unimaginable danger. And no one, not even the brightest minds at NASA, could predict which it would be. The universe had delivered its message loud and clear. We are not alone. And whatever was approaching, it was unlike anything we had ever encountered before. The night sky over Earth was ablaze with anticipation. Amateur astronomers pointed their telescopes at the red planet, hoping to catch a glimpse of the unfolding cosmic drama. Across observatories worldwide, instruments were locked in synchronization, tracking every flicker, every motion of the swarm as it descended toward Mars. The world had entered a new phase of wonder and fear, united by a shared obsession with these inexplicable entities. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, tension had reached a fever pitch. For days, Dr. Elena Rodriguez and her team had been operating on little more than coffee and adrenaline. Each new data packet sent shockwaves through their ranks. The swarm's behavior was becoming increasingly unpredictable. Instead of a direct collision with Mars, the objects seemed to be adjusting their trajectories mid-flight, almost as if they were consciously selecting landing zones. No known natural force could account for this. The most alarming readings came from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. Its hyperspectral imaging revealed faint, pulsating glows emanating from several of the objects. These glows shifted in rhythm, resembling patterns. The sequence was too complex to be random. Dr. Marcus Lee stared at the display, his hands trembling. "It's a signal," he muttered. Elena snapped toward him. "A signal? From whom? For what purpose?" Marcus exhaled slowly, struggling to find the words. "I don't know, but these pulses, they're repeating. Not like Morse code, but structured, layered. This isn't a reflection of sunlight. It's communication." The room fell silent. The weight of his words pressed down on everyone present. If Marcus were right, these objects weren't just alive. They were intelligent. The possibility of intelligent forced a dramatic shift in priorities. A high-level emergency meeting was convened with representatives from NASA, ESA, the United Nations, and top military officials. The discussion was chaotic. Some pushed for immediate public disclosure, arguing that secrecy would only worsen the panic when the truth inevitably came out. Others insisted that revealing too much too soon could destabilize governments and economies worldwide.
Amid the heated arguments, Dr. Rodriguez presented her findings. "We are dealing with something beyond anything in human history. These objects are not behaving like comets, asteroids, or any known natural phenomenon. If they are intelligent, we must prepare for the possibility of first contact." Her words were met with stunned silence. Then a general at the far end of the table spoke, his voice cold and pragmatic. "If they are intelligent, we must also prepare for the possibility of hostility." The statement ignited a storm of debate. Military factions argued for defensive measures, including the deployment of weaponized satellites and the preparation of contingency plans for Mars and even Earth itself. Scientists countered that aggressive action could provoke an unknowable response. In the end, a fragile compromise was reached. They would continue to observe and analyze, while quietly readying defensive assets in orbit, just in case. Meanwhile, the swarm continued its descent toward Mars. Observers noted a strange phenomenon. As the objects approached the planet's thin atmosphere, they altered their formations again, grouping into distinct clusters. Each cluster descended along a precise path, avoiding dust storms and regions with intense magnetic interference. It was as though they possessed detailed knowledge of Mars's geography and atmospheric conditions, knowledge that humanity itself had only acquired in recent decades through painstaking exploration.
As the first cluster penetrated the atmosphere, the Perseverance rover captured unprecedented images. The objects glowed brightly, surrounded by a faint halo of ionized particles. Instead of burning up like meteors, they slowed their descent, maneuvering gracefully through the sky before disappearing behind the planet's horizon. The implications were staggering. These weren't natural objects at all. They were machines, or life forms with technology far surpassing anything humanity had ever imagined. News of the descent couldn't be contained. Amateur astronomers had recorded the glowing streaks with high-powered cameras, and within hours, the footage was spreading across social media platforms like wildfire. Public reaction was immediate and explosive. Hashtags like #MarsContact and #AtlasArrival dominated trending lists worldwide. Governments scrambled to manage the chaos. Official statements were vague and carefully worded, acknowledging unusual activity while avoiding definitive explanations. But the public wasn't fooled. Across cities, people gathered in streets and parks, staring up at the night sky as if expecting to see the mysterious visitors themselves. Some responded with awe and hope, imagining the dawn of a new era of cosmic connection. Others were gripped by fear, stockpiling supplies and spreading apocalyptic rumors. In a dimly lit war room, deep beneath the Pentagon, military leaders reviewed the latest intelligence. Satellite images showed several clusters landing in regions of Mars with significant geological interest: ancient riverbeds, volcanic plains, and the edges of polar ice caps. These were very places where scientists had long theorized microbial life might once have existed. A voice crackled over the secure line from a reconnaissance satellite operator. "We have confirmation. Multiple objects are stationary on the surface. Their configuration resembles a grid, highly precise." The general in charge leaned forward, his expression grim. "Are they doing anything?" "Not yet, sir. They're just waiting." The word sent a chill through the room. Waiting implied intention, strategy. Back at JPL, Dr. Rodriguez and her team pored over the data, desperate for answers. Marcus focused on the rhythmic pulses emitted by the objects during their descent. He had been analyzing the patterns tirelessly, and now he believed he had made a breakthrough. "Elena," he said urgently, "I think they're trying to communicate with us. Look at this sequence." He pointed to a complex waveform displayed on his monitor. It's structured around prime numbers. That's a universal constant. If you wanted to prove intelligence to another species, you'd use mathematics. Elena's eyes widened. "You're saying they know we're watching us?" "Yes," Marcus replied, "and they want us to know they're watching us too." The revelation electrified the team. If the objects were deliberately sending signals, it meant they had not only detected human observation, but had chosen to respond. This was no longer a passive encounter. It was an interaction. Immediately, Elena contacted Mission Control to relay the findings. A decision was made to transmit a simple mathematical response using the Deep Space Network, carefully encoded to avoid misinterpretation. The message consisted of a sequence of prime numbers followed by the mathematical constant pi, a universal signature of intelligence. As the signal was sent, the world collectively held its breath. Would the mysterious visitors acknowledge the attempt? Hours passed with no response. Doubt began to creep in. Had they misunderstood the pulses? Was humanity simply too primitive to grasp the true meaning of the communication? Then, just as hope began to fade, the swarm reacted. A brilliant pulse of light erupted from one of the landed clusters on Mars, visible even to orbiting satellites. The pulse matched the sequence sent by NASA, followed by a new, more complex pattern. Marcus's face lit up with excitement and terror. They understood us, and now They're talking back. The realization sent shockwaves through every corner of the scientific and political world. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. An exchange had begun, and there was no turning back. As the message was decoded, its complexity became apparent. It wasn't just a string of numbers. It was a blueprint, schematics of some kind, depicting geometric shapes and energy patterns beyond human comprehension. Elena studied the images, her mind racing. This isn't just communication, it's an invitation. They want us to build something. But the question loomed larger than ever. Build what? And for what purpose? Were these visitors offering a gift? A tool to advance humanity's understanding of the cosmos? Or were they laying the groundwork for something far more sinister? Before answers could be found, a new crisis erupted. One of the clusters on Mars began to move, gliding silently across the surface. As it advanced, the Martian soil beneath it appeared to shift and ripple, as if reacting to its presence. The Perseverance rover, stationed hundreds of kilometers away, picked up seismic disturbances emanating from the area.
Simultaneously, orbital satellites detected a surge of energy emanating from beneath Mars' surface. It was as if the planet itself were awakening in response to the visitors' arrival. Elena's heart pounded as she watched the data streams. "This isn't just about the swarm," she whispered. "Mars itself, it's part of the mystery." The implications were staggering. What if Mars wasn't a dead world after all? What if the visitors had come not to explore, but to reactivate something ancient buried beneath the planet's crust? As this realization took hold, global leaders faced a stark choice: continue the dialogue and risk unleashing forces they couldn't control, or take drastic measures to neutralize the threat before it was too late. The debate was fierce and bitter. Some argued for immediate retaliation, proposing missile strikes to destroy the clusters before they could complete their unknown mission. Others pleaded for patience, warning that a hostile act could provoke a response far beyond humanity's capacity to withstand. Meanwhile, the swarm's numbers continued to grow. New objects emerged from the void, drawn toward Mars as if by some unseen beacon. They didn't just multiply, they evolved, their shapes shifting into increasingly complex forms. The countdown to first contact had begun, and the fate of two worlds now hung in a delicate, terrifying balance. The closer 3I ATS moved toward the Martian orbit, the more erratic the readings became. Initial spectrographic analysis indicated that the objects were rich in metallic compounds, nickel, iron, and even traces of rare earth elements not typically associated with simple space debris. This discovery fueled wild theories. Could these be the remnants of an ancient asteroid collision? Or perhaps some sort of naturally occurring phenomenon that no one had encountered before? However, as weeks passed, the data painted a different picture, one that scientists could no longer ignore. The objects weren't just drifting in random patterns, they appeared to be moving with intention, as though responding to 3I ATS itself. Observatories tracking their paths noticed a peculiar synchronization. When the comet adjusted its trajectory, even slightly, the surrounding objects would mirror its movements, like a flock of birds following a leader through the sky. NASA and ESA held a series of closed-door meetings to discuss the implications. Internal memos leaked to the press described heated debates between astrophysicists and planetary defense experts. Some argued that the objects must be fragments of the comet's icy nucleus, ejected as it neared the sun. Others were convinced there was something more at play, perhaps even a new category of interstellar visitor unlike anything humanity had ever recorded. As the news began to leak, the public reacted with a mix of wonder and fear. Social media lit up with speculation. Hashtags like Atlas Swarm and Mars Mystery trended worldwide. Amateur astronomers began pointing their telescopes at Mars, desperate to catch a glimpse of the strange formation. Grainy images and videos spread rapidly across platforms, sparking conspiracy theories about alien probes and secret space missions. Governments, meanwhile, scrambled to maintain order. The Chinese National Space Administration announced it was redirecting its Tianwen-3 mission to observe the phenomenon, while India's ISRO declared it would dedicate additional resources to tracking the swarm. Suddenly, what had been a quiet scientific curiosity became a geopolitical flashpoint. Whoever could explain or control these objects might gain a significant advantage in the new space race. Back at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the mood grew increasingly tense. A team of data analysts discovered a disturbing pattern hidden in the swarm's movements. Using advanced algorithms, they plotted the trajectories of thousands of individual objects and found that when mapped together, they formed a spiraling shape, almost like a vast three-dimensional helix wrapping itself around the path of 3I ATS. Even more unsettling was the fact that the spiral seemed to be shrinking, tightening its formation as it drew closer to Mars. Dr. Elias Voss, a leading astrophysicist on the team, couldn't shake the feeling that this was no coincidence. During a late-night meeting, he presented his findings to his exhausted colleagues. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the holographic display. "These aren't random fragments. They're behaving like a system, coordinated, maybe even designed. If this trend continues, the spiral will converge on a single point, right here." He tapped the screen, highlighting a spot just beyond Mars's orbit. And that point intersects perfectly with 3I ATS's projected path. The room fell silent. For a long moment, no one knew what to say. Finally, one junior researcher whispered, "Are you saying this thing is alive?" Voss didn't answer directly. Instead, he exhaled slowly and said, "I'm saying we need to prepare for the possibility that we're not just observing a natural phenomenon. This could be an engineered event, something that was meant to happen." Outside the walls of JPL, the world began to hold its breath. News outlets ran dramatic headlines: "Mystery swarm near Mars defies explanation," and "Scientists stunned by synchronized space objects." Television pundits debated whether humanity was on the verge of first contact or a catastrophic encounter. Religious leaders weighed in, some calling it a sign from the heavens, others warning of impending doom. Meanwhile, deep space probes provided new, high-resolution images of the swarm. What they revealed only deepened the mystery. The objects were smooth and reflective, with sharp edges and symmetrical patterns that no natural rock or ice fragment could produce. Many of them appeared to be hexagonal or octagonal in shape, like tiles from an impossibly vast mosaic. Even more puzzling, their surfaces emitted faint pulses of light, almost like a coded signal. As the swarm continued its inexorable approach toward Mars, a strange phenomenon occurred on Earth. Radio telescopes around the globe began picking up unusual bursts of electromagnetic energy, seemingly emanating from the same region of space. These bursts were intermittent, like a heartbeat, and their timing matched perfectly with the pulses observed on the objects themselves. At first, scientists thought it might be interference or some kind of cosmic background noise. But when the same signal was detected by multiple observatories, all perfectly synchronized, doubt turned to alarm. "It's not random," Voss declared during a hastily convened press conference. "Someone, or something, is transmitting." The revelation sparked a frenzy of activity. Linguists, cryptographers, and computer scientists were brought in to analyze the signal. Attempts to decode it proved frustratingly difficult. Some patterns resembled mathematical sequences, while others seemed almost musical, as though the message were both scientific and artistic in nature. As the days passed, the pulse grew stronger. Entire cities began to feel its effects, not directly, but through the disruption of satellite networks, GPS systems, and even the internet itself. Communication satellites reported sudden power surges and unexplained glitches. Air traffic controllers struggled to maintain order as navigation systems went haywire. Governments were forced to admit what they had long suspected. Whatever was happening near Mars was already affecting Earth. The swarm's presence wasn't just a distant curiosity, it was a threat to global infrastructure and security. Military forces around the world went on high alert. In the United States, the newly formed Space Force deployed experimental defense satellites, while Russia and China announced joint military drills in orbit. The possibility of conflict loomed as nations prepared for the worst. Amid the chaos, a small group of independent scientists continued to search for answers. Among them was Dr. Leela Moreau, a linguist specializing in ancient languages and symbols. She noticed something peculiar about the patterns in the signal. When arranged in a certain way, they resembled glyphs found in ancient Mesopotamian text, specifically those related to early astronomical observations. "It's as if this message has been with us all along," Moreau explained to a stunned audience during a live-stream symposium. "These patterns predate modern civilization. Whoever, or whatever, is sending the signal knew about us long before we knew about them." Her theory was met with both awe and skepticism. Could it be possible that humanity's earliest myths and legends were inspired by encounters with this very phenomenon? If so, what role had it played in shaping human history, and what did it want now? As 3I ATS drew ever closer to Mars, the spiral formation reached a critical point. The objects began accelerating, their movements growing more synchronized and deliberate. It was clear that something monumental was about to occur. Space agencies worldwide trained every available instrument on the event. The eyes of billions were fixed on live feeds from orbiting probes, waiting for a moment that might change the course of human history forever. And then, in the stillness of space, the swarm began to merge. At first, the process was almost imperceptible. Individual objects drifted toward one another, locking into place like pieces of a puzzle. But as the minutes passed, the pace quickened. A colossal structure began to take shape, one so vast and complex that it defied comprehension. From Earth, the live images were breathtaking. The formation now resembled a gigantic ring encircling the path of 3I ATS like a cosmic gateway. Energy surged through its lattice-like framework, creating a dazzling display of light and color. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. People gathered in city squares, huddled around screens, whispering prayers or gasping in awe. It was a spectacle unlike anything humanity had ever witnessed, a vision that transcended science and myth alike. But beneath the wonder lurked a growing dread. What was this structure's purpose? Was it a beacon, a weapon, or something far more unimaginable? Back at JPL, Dr. Vosk watched the unfolding scene with a mixture of fascination and fear. "We've crossed a threshold," he murmured to his colleagues. "Whatever this is, it's no longer just about observation. We're participants now, and there's no going back." As 3I ATS approached the center of the ring, instruments on Earth registered a massive surge of energy. The comet's icy surface began to sublimate at an accelerated rate, releasing jets of gas and dust that illuminated the surrounding space like fireworks. Then, without warning, the entire swarm emitted a final, blinding pulse of light brighter than the sun itself. For several agonizing seconds, every camera feed, every telescope, every sensor went dark. Humanity was left blind, suspended in uncertainty, as the fate of 3I ATS, and perhaps the world itself, hung in the balance. When the blinding light finally subsided, humanity collectively exhaled, but what they saw next was nothing short of terrifying. The colossal ring that had formed around 3I ATS was gone. In its place floated a massive, singular object, dark and monolithic, dwarfing even the largest space stations ever conceived by humans. Its surface was so black it seemed to swallow light itself, with only faint lines of glowing symbols pulsing across its structure, like veins of molten fire. For several heartbeats, there was only silence. Instruments on Earth struggled to recalibrate, blinded by the overwhelming energy spike. When data finally started streaming in, the readings were incomprehensible. Gravity in the region had spiked dramatically, as though the object were bending space around it. Radiation levels fluctuated wildly, and nearby satellites either went dead or began transmitting garbled signals filled with strange, repeating patterns.
Dr. Elias Voss stood motionless, staring at the feed with wide, unblinking eyes. "This isn't a comet anymore," he whispered.
It's something entirely different, something activated. The room erupted into chaos as scientists scrambled to make sense of the impossible. Some argued it was a weapon, others a transportation gateway. But amid the confusion, one fact was undeniable. The object was moving. Slowly but deliberately, it began to drift toward Mars. On the Martian surface, rovers and orbiters sent back stunning images of the dark behemoth's shadow creeping across the landscape. The effect was unsettling, like watching a solar eclipse in slow motion. As it approached, seismic activity on the planet spiked dramatically. Entire dust storms erupted spontaneously, swirling into massive vortices that seemed to align with the object's movement. Earth's governments convened in emergency sessions. The United Nations declared a global state of alert, urging calm while quietly mobilizing military assets. Behind closed doors, world leaders debated the unthinkable. If this object posed a direct threat, could humanity even hope to stop it? The public, however, was far from calm. In major cities, mass gatherings filled the streets. Some people celebrated the event as a sign of salvation or contact with higher beings. Others rioted, convinced that the end of the world was near. Religious groups proclaimed prophecies fulfilled, while conspiracy theories claimed that world governments had known about this moment for decades and kept it secret. As fear and excitement spread, something strange began happening to Earth's technology. Power grids experienced rolling blackouts. Wireless communications failed without warning. Even basic electronics flickered and behaved erratically. Scientists traced the disturbances back to a low-frequency hum now emanating from the massive object near Mars. It wasn't just transmitting signals anymore, it was broadcasting power, affecting systems across millions of miles. Dr. Leela Moreau, still working feverishly to decode the earlier pulses, realized with dawning horror that the new hum matched patterns found in ancient Mesopotamian star maps. "It's a countdown," she said, her voice trembling. "These symbols, they're marking intervals of time. Whatever this thing is, it's preparing for something." Her revelation sent shockwaves through the scientific community. If the object was counting down, then it meant a specific event was about to occur. But what and when? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. As the object neared Mars, its glowing symbols began to pulse faster and faster, like a heartbeat racing toward a climax. Observatories captured breathtaking images of the planet's atmosphere reacting violently. Giant auroras spread across the sky, visible even from Earth with the naked eye. Mars itself seemed to shudder under the strain, its thin crust cracking in places, as geysers of dust and gas erupted into space. Then, in a single, synchronized moment, every object in orbit around Mars went dark. Satellites, probes, even the International Mars Station, all communication ceased. A chilling silence fell over mission control centers around the world, as they realized that they were now completely blind to what was happening on the surface. Moments later, a signal unlike anything ever recorded reached Earth. It was deafeningly loud across every radio frequency, so powerful it overwhelmed even military-grade filters. The message wasn't random static this time. It was language, complex, structured, and terrifyingly deliberate. Dr. Moreau's team worked furiously to decode it, their computer systems pushed to the brink by the sheer volume of data. After hours of frantic effort, they decoded the first fragment. The translated text appeared on screens across the world. "Prepare for passage." The simplicity of the message belied its staggering implications. Passage to where? Or through what? Theories exploded like wildfire. Some believed the object was preparing to transport Mars or even the entire solar system to another location in the galaxy. Others feared it was a harbinger of invasion, a gateway for something unspeakable to come through. As panic mounted, Dr. Voss proposed a daring plan. Using Earth's most advanced propulsion systems, he suggested sending a manned mission to intercept the object before the countdown reached 0. "We can't just sit here and wait," he argued before a council of world leaders. "If this thing is preparing to act, we need to understand its purpose. We need answers before it's too late." The Despite intense debate, the plan was approved. A joint coalition of spacefaring nations launched a rapid response mission, hastily assembling a crew of the best and brightest astronauts, scientists, and engineers. The ship, codenamed Aegis, was designed to reach Mars' orbit in record time, using experimental ion drives and cutting-edge shielding technology. The launch was broadcast live to billions around the globe. As the Aegis lifted off, cheers erupted in some places while others wept, fearing they were witnessing a suicide mission. For the crew, there was no turning back. Their objective was clear: approach the object, gather data, and if possible, establish contact or destroy it if necessary. As the Aegis sped toward its destination, Earth's problems worsened. The object's hum grew louder, now audible to the human ear in certain frequencies. Strange phenomena began occurring worldwide. Animals behaved erratically, compasses spun wildly, and unexplained lights appeared in the night sky. In some regions, people reported vivid shared dreams of alien landscapes and towering structures eerily similar to the one forming near Mars. Dr. Moreau began to suspect that the object wasn't just broadcasting a signal, it was altering human consciousness. "It's rewriting us," she told Voss in a private call. "Our thoughts, our perceptions. It's like it's preparing our minds for something we can't yet comprehend."
Meanwhile, the countdown accelerated. What had once been days between pulses was now mere hours. Voss and his team calculated that the event would occur at the precise moment 3I/Atlas reached perihelion, the point in its orbit closest to the Sun. That moment was only 72 hours away. As the deadline loomed, tensions on Earth reached a breaking point. Governments imposed martial law to control mass riots and looting. Religious movements declared the coming event as divine judgment, urging followers to prepare their souls. Scientists worked without rest, desperately trying to predict the outcome. High above the chaos, the crew of the Aegis finally reached Mars' orbit. What they saw defied belief. The massive object now hovered directly above the planet, its underside glowing with intricate patterns of light. Beneath it, the Martian surface had been transformed into a sprawling lattice of geometric lines, like circuitry etched into the planet's crust. Vast chasms radiated outward from a central point, glowing faintly as though energy were flowing through them. It's a machine," whispered Commander Arya Solis, the mission leader. "Mars itself has become part of it." The crew launched drones to gather data, but many were instantly disabled by the object's energy field. Those that survived sent back fragments of information, enough to confirm that the lattice was channeling unimaginable amounts of power, far beyond anything humanity had ever conceived. Then, as the Aegis drew closer, a beam of light shot out from the object, scanning the ship from bow to stern. Systems flickered, alarms blared, and crew members clutched their heads as a wave of nausea and dizziness swept over them. When it ended, a single symbol appeared on the ship's main display, a perfect replica of the spiral formation the swarm had formed earlier. Dr. Moreau, monitoring from Earth, gasped when she saw it. "That's their signature. It's a message, but I don't know what it means." Before she could elaborate, the countdown reached its final minute. Across the solar system, instruments recorded a dramatic surge in energy. The optic symbols now pulsed so rapidly they appeared as a continuous glow, bathing Mars in an eerie, otherworldly light. The crew of the Aegis braced for impact as the ship was drawn inexorably towards the center of the formation. On Earth, billions watched in stunned silence as the live feed displayed the final moments before zero. And then, with a soundless detonation of light and force, everything changed. For a fraction of a second, the solar system seemed to fold in on itself, as if reality were being rewritten. Space bent and twisted, stars elongated into streaks of color, and time itself seemed to stutter. Instruments failed, sensors went blind, and for a heartbeat, existence itself paused. When normality returned, Mars was gone. The entire planet, along with the massive object and the Aegis, had vanished without a trace. Where Mars had once been, there was now only empty space, shimmering faintly with residual energy. The disappearance of Mars sent an immediate shockwave of terror and disbelief across the entire world. Within seconds of the event, every news outlet on Earth interrupted their programming with breaking updates, their anchors struggling to describe what had just happened. Billions of people stared at their screens in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the reality before them. Mars, the red planet, the focus of countless dreams, missions, and centuries of study, was simply gone. The first moments were filled with chaos. Astronomers confirmed that it wasn't an illusion or sensor malfunction. The gravitational influence of Mars had completely vanished. Spacecraft that once orbited the planet were now drifting aimlessly, caught in the sudden absence of its pole. A wave of debris spread outward from where the planet had been, scattering through space like remnants of a shattered dream. Governments convened emergency summits. The United Nations Security Council declared the event the most significant crisis in human history. Fear gripped every nation as they realized that a power beyond comprehension had just demonstrated its ability to erase entire worlds. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Dr. Elias Voss sat in stunned silence, unable to process what he had just witnessed. Around him, scientists wept openly or collapsed into chairs, their faces pale with shock. This changes everything, he whispered. We're no longer observers. We're next. Dr. Leela Moreau was already at work, frantically analyzing the data that had been recorded in the final seconds before the detonation of light. Her hands trembled as she sifted through the overwhelming flood of information. Somewhere in the chaos, she believed, lay the key to understanding what had happened, and perhaps how to stop it from happening again. The world outside descended into panic. Major cities were overwhelmed by riots and mass migrations as people fled to what they believed were safe zones. Religious movements declared the event as divine judgment, their followers flocking to temples, churches, and mosques in a desperate bid for salvation. Markets crashed, governments teetered, and humanity's fragile sense of stability unraveled completely. In the midst of the chaos, a startling discovery emerged. While Mars had vanished, a strange residual energy field remained in its former location. Satellites detected faint pulses within this field, eerily similar to the earlier countdown signal. Dr. Moreau's team worked tirelessly to decode them. After hours of tense effort, the pulses revealed a new message. First passage complete. Prepare for second. The implications were horrifying. The event that erased Mars wasn't a one-time occurrence. It was merely the beginning. Another passage was coming and no one knew which planet would be next. Panic turned to desperation as scientists raced against time. Voss proposed a radical theory. The massive object that had absorbed Mars hadn't destroyed it. It had transported it somewhere else. He pointed to faint distortions in space-time detected moments after the disappearance, evidence of a kind of wormhole or interdimensional gateway. Mars isn't gone, he insisted. It's been moved, taken. If we can trace where it went, we might be able to follow.
His idea was met with skepticism, but it was the only sliver of hope anyone had. Governments authorized the construction of a new mission, even more ambitious than the Aegis. Dubbed Project Odyssey, it aimed to create a ship capable of replicating the energy signature of the object, allowing it to travel through the same gateway. Meanwhile, unknown to Earth, the crew of the Aegis were alive. Commander Arias Solis awoke to darkness and silence. Her body floated weightlessly, her mind struggling to process fragmented memories of blinding light and crushing force. Slowly, she became aware of her surroundings. The ship's interior was intact, but the external sensors displayed an environment unlike anything she had ever seen. Outside the viewport, there was no familiar starfield, only a swirling expanse of shifting colors and luminous clouds. Massive structures, too vast to fully comprehend, drifted through the void, their forms alien and geometric. It was as though the ship had been transported to a different universe entirely, one governed by rules beyond human understanding. The rest of the crew gradually regained consciousness. Their relief at being alive quickly gave way to dread as they realized Mars itself was nowhere to be seen. The planet hadn't been destroyed, but it wasn't near them either. Instead, the Aegis appeared to be floating in a vast enclosed space,
a kind of cosmic chamber with no visible boundaries. As they scanned the area, a massive shape emerged from the glowing mist. It was the same monolithic object that had absorbed Mars, now fully revealed. Its surface pulsed with intricate patterns of light, and strange appendages extended outward like the limbs of a colossal mechanical creature. "It's waiting for us," whispered Kai Ren, his voice barely audible. Before anyone could respond, the ship's systems activated on their own. A holographic projection filled the cabin, displaying a spiral pattern identical to the one that had surrounded 3I ATLS earlier. Then, to their astonishment, a voice spoke, not in any known language, but directly into their minds. "You have entered the passage." The words reverberated inside their skulls, impossible to ignore. Commander Solis tried to speak, her voice shaking. "Who are you? What do you want from us?" The voice responded without hesitation. "Observers, travelers, builders, you are the second." The cryptic answer only deepened their confusion. Solis pressed further. "Second what? What happened to Mars? Where is it now?" For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the holographic spiral shifted, showing an image of Mars suspended within a network of glowing lines. The planet appeared intact, but its surface was transformed, its once red plains now overlaid with strange alien structures. "Preserved, integrated, prepared." The words sent chills down the crew's spines. Back on Earth, Dr. Moreau experienced a breakthrough. She realized that the countdown messages were not merely warnings, but instructions. By correlating ancient star charts with the object's energy patterns, she discovered a disturbing truth. The events were following a predetermined sequence, one that had been unfolding for thousands of years. "This has happened before," she told Voss in a hushed voice. "Our myths, our legends, they're memories of previous passages. We were never alone. We were just too primitive to understand." Voss felt the weight of her words sink in. If Mars was the first, Earth could be next. The realization spurred a frantic race against time. Project Odyssey accelerated beyond all safety protocols. Engineers worked around the clock, knowing that failure meant annihilation. Meanwhile, Earth's population teetered on the brink of collapse. Entire nations fractured under the strain, their leaders unable to maintain order as billions demanded answers and protection. As the new countdown ticked towards zero, strange phenomena intensified. Skies around the world filled with shimmering lights, like auroras stretched across entire continents. Oceans churned violently, and earthquakes rattled regions far from fault lines. Even the moon began to exhibit unusual activity, its orbit subtly shifting in ways that defied physics. Dr. Moreau realized with dawning horror that the passage didn't just target planets, it reshaped entire star systems. "They're rewriting reality itself," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. In the void beyond, the crew of the Aegis made a desperate attempt to communicate. Using the ship's remaining power, they broadcasted a signal encoded with mathematical constants and images of humanity's achievements. To their surprise, the object responded, not with words, but with a vivid vision projected directly into their minds. The vision revealed a sprawling network of countless worlds, each linked by the same spiral pattern. Some were lush and thriving, filled with advanced civilizations. Others were barren husks, drained of life and energy. The implication was clear. Whatever these beings were, they had been harvesting planets across the galaxy for eons. As the vision faded, the voice returned. "Earth is next." The message struck like a hammer blow. The crew's mission had gone from exploration to survival. They had to warn Earth, but the distance, both physical and dimensional, seemed insurmountable. On Earth, the countdown entered its final hours. Project Odyssey was only partially complete, but there was no more time to wait. Voss made the call to launch immediately, knowing it was a gamble with humanity's future. As the massive ship roared to life, people around the globe gathered to watch, their hopes pinned on this single act of defiance. Priests prayed, children wept, and soldiers stood ready for whatever came next. The launch was flawless.
Odyssey surged into space, racing towards the residual energy field where Mars had once been. Inside, Voss and Moreau worked tirelessly, guiding the crew through untested maneuvers. Meanwhile, the Aegis crew prepared for their own desperate move. By overloading their ship's reactor, they hoped to create a beacon strong enough to pierce the dimensional barrier and reach Earth. It was a suicide mission, but they had no other choice. As the final seconds of the countdown ticked away, both ships acted simultaneously. Odyssey plunged into the energy field just as the Aegis detonated its reactor. For a brief moment, the two realities connected. Voss and Moreau saw a fleeting image of Commander Solis and her crew, their faces filled with determination and sorrow. Then, a final message cut through the noise, clear and unmistakable. Stop the passage. And with that, the connection shattered. The countdown hit 0. The sky above Earth split open, revealing the same blinding spiral that had once surrounded Mars. Humanity's fate now hung by a thread, balanced between annihilation and salvation. The first clear images of these strange multiplying objects came from a series of deep space surveillance satellites operated jointly by several international space agencies. These satellites, positioned strategically around Mars' orbital path, were originally designed to monitor potential asteroid threats and track natural interplanetary debris. But when their instruments turned towards 3I/Atlas, what they captured went way beyond anything their operators had prepared for. At first, scientists assumed that the anomalies were simply optical distortions, glitches caused by the satellite's extreme distance and the immense glare of reflected sunlight. But as more data came in, it became increasingly difficult to dismiss. Each passing hour revealed additional formations, appearing almost as if they were spontaneously generating themselves in clusters around the comet-like body. Even more troubling, these formations weren't behaving like inert debris. They moved with purpose, seemingly coordinating their trajectories in ways no random fragments ever could. The pattern became undeniable. Across multiple observation points, astronomers noted that the objects didn't simply drift in random directions. They appeared to be aligning with the gravitational fields of Mars itself, almost as if they were preparing for an approach towards the planet's upper atmosphere. The precision of their movements was deeply unsettling. To some, it seemed to mimic the behavior of a swarm, a collective acting as a singular unified organism. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the data triggered emergency protocols. A special task force was convened, bringing together astrophysicists, planetary defense experts, and artificial intelligence researchers to analyze the strange behavior. Their first priority was to rule out known natural phenomena. Could these objects be frozen water fragments, breaking off from 3I/Atlas as it warmed during its approach to the sun? Could electrical interactions with the solar wind be creating the illusion of coordination where none actually existed? For several tense days, teams ran simulation after simulation. Every conventional explanation was tested, and every single one failed. The masses of these objects were too stable for simple ice crystals. The reflective properties didn't match common interplanetary dust or metallic asteroid debris. Most baffling of all, their trajectory showed evidence of self-correction. In other words, when a fragment's path deviated slightly due to gravitational perturbations or solar wind pressure, it would adjust, almost as if under intelligent control. Publicly, NASA remains silent. Official press releases framed the activity as routine monitoring of a minor interstellar visitor, emphasizing that no direct threat to Mars or Earth had been identified. But behind closed doors, concern was rapidly escalating. Government officials were briefed daily. Security agencies began exploring worst-case scenarios, including the possibility, however remote, that these objects represented some form of non-terrestrial technology. The term unknown autonomous entities began circulating in internal memos, a deliberately vague phrase meant to avoid the direct use of the word artificial. Meanwhile, amateur astronomers around the world began to notice odd patterns in their own observations.
With the rapid improvement of consumer telescopes and publicly available sky tracking software, highly skilled hobbyists were able to detect faint glimmers near the path of 3I/Atlas. Online forums lit up with speculation. Some believed the formations were simply a rare natural phenomenon, while others jumped immediately to theories of alien probes or interstellar drones. The mystery spread far beyond the scientific community, capturing the public imagination and sowing confusion on a global scale. As the comet drew nearer to Mars, a new layer of complexity emerged. Sensitive instruments detected low-frequency electromagnetic signals emanating from the clusters. At first, these signals were dismissed as background noise, perhaps caused by solar storms or interference from distant cosmic sources. But when researchers applied advanced filtering techniques, they uncovered something extraordinary. The signals weren't random. They were structured, repeating at precise intervals with patterns too organized to be the product of mere chance. This revelation caused panic amongst the members of the task force. One senior analyst reportedly slammed his fist on the table during a classified meeting, demanding to know whether the world was witnessing the first definitive evidence of extraterrestrial communication. His superiors urged calm, emphasizing that there could still be unknown natural explanations. Yet in private, many of them began to grapple with the same terrifying possibility, that humanity might not be alone, and that these mysterious formations could represent a technology far older and more advanced than anything ever conceived on Earth. Mars itself became a focal point of speculation. With its thin atmosphere and relatively stable surface, the planet has long been a subject of fascination for scientists and science fiction writers alike. Now, some experts began to wonder whether these objects were deliberately targeting Mars for reasons unknown. Could the planet serve as a staging ground for something larger? Were these formations merely scouts sent ahead of a greater arrival? Or were they perhaps ancient machines awakening from a long dormant state, triggered by the proximity of 3I/Atlas itself?
Theories multiplied as quickly as the objects themselves. Some physicists proposed that the phenomenon might be a form of self-replicating nanotechnology, a von Neumann swarm, as it's called in theoretical models. In this scenario, the initial cluster of entities would harvest raw material from asteroids and interplanetary dust, constructing copies of themselves to expand their numbers exponentially. If true, this could explain the sudden increase in their population as the comet approached the inner solar system. Others speculated that the objects were not machines at all, but a previously unknown form of life. Just as microbial colonies on Earth exhibit complex collective behavior, these entities might represent an entirely new category of biological existence, adapted to the vacuum of space. If so, their motives could be incomprehensible to human observers. Were they migrating, fleeing some distant cosmic event, or merely following an ancient instinct that drew them toward Mars and eventually toward Earth? NASA's leadership faced an agonizing dilemma. If the truth were revealed too soon, it could trigger widespread panic, economic collapse, and geopolitical instability. But withholding information carried its own risks, especially as amateur astronomers and independent researchers grew more vocal in their demands for transparency. After a heated internal debate, the agency decided on a carefully calibrated public strategy: gradual disclosure. The first step would be to release limited data about 3I/Atlas, framing the multiplying objects as a curious but harmless feature of interstellar comets. This would buy time while scientists raced to understand the true nature of the phenomenon. But even as these plans were being drafted, the situation took another dramatic turn. A series of high-resolution images captured by the European Space Agency's Mars Express orbiter revealed something shocking. Several of the objects had descended into the upper atmosphere of Mars itself, briefly igniting trails of plasma as they encountered resistance from the thin Martian air. Incredibly, instead of burning up or disintegrating, they seemed to stabilize, hovering just above the surface before vanishing from view. The implications were staggering. These entities were not passive fragments. They were active, adaptive,
and apparently capable of controlled atmospheric entry. Suddenly, the possibility of direct interaction with the Martian environment became all too real. Some members of the task force began advocating for immediate evacuation of robotic assets on Mars, including the Perseverance rover and the Ingenuity helicopter, fearing that they could become targets or vectors for unknown contamination. Meanwhile, governments around the world quietly elevated their alert levels. Military satellites were redirected to monitor the situation. Secretive defense organizations began running simulations of potential impact scenarios, including the terrifying possibility that the swarm could spread beyond Mars and begin moving toward Earth. At the same time, a parallel effort emerged amongst civilian scientists to crowdsource observations. Using a network of ground-based telescopes and open-source software, they attempted to map the swarm's behavior in real time. This decentralized approach began yielding fascinating insights. Preliminary models suggested that the entities were not acting randomly. Their movements followed a complex mathematical pattern, one that bore striking similarities to certain fractal structures found in nature, such as the branching of trees, the growth of coral, or even the neural pathways of a brain. This discovery raised profound questions. If the swarm's behavior mirrored the patterns of biological growth, could it indicate a form of consciousness? Was humanity witnessing the emergence of a collective intelligence on an interplanetary scale? Or was this resemblance merely a coincidence, an artifact of humans' tendency to see patterns where none exist? As the debate raged, the comet itself continued its inexorable journey. 3I/Atlas was now visibly brighter in the night sky, a pale greenish glow that could be seen even with modest backyard telescopes. For the general public, it became a spectacle, a celestial event to be admired and photographed. Few realized that behind the scenes, scientists were grappling with questions that could reshape humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. Then came the breakthrough that changed everything. A team of cryptographers and signal analysts working at a secure facility in California made a startling discovery. The electromagnetic emissions from the swarm weren't just structured, they were encoded. Hidden within the repeating patterns was a form of data transmission, one that bore no resemblance to any human-made signal. Even more astonishing, when the data was visualized, it formed a three-dimensional representation of the solar system, with Mars highlighted at its center. This revelation shattered any lingering doubts about the swarm's nature. It was no longer possible to dismiss the entities as natural phenomena or biological oddities. They were sending a message that, for reasons unknown, focused on Mars. As word of the discovery spread through the highest levels of government, a sense of urgency gripped the international community. Emergency summits were convened behind closed doors. Space agencies, militaries, and intelligence services shared data at an unprecedented level of cooperation, driven by the recognition that the mystery surrounding 3I/Atlas and its accompanying swarm could no longer be ignored. Yet even as the message was decoded, its meaning remained elusive. Some scientists believed it to be a warning, perhaps a plea to stay away from Mars, or to prepare for an impending event. Others argued that it could be an invitation, a signal meant to guide future explorers to a specific location on the Red Planet. Still others feared that it might be a tactical maneuver, designed to lure humanity into a trap.
With the comet now only weeks away from its closest approach, tensions reached the fever pitch. The fate of two worlds, Mars and Earth, hung in the balance. And as the swarm continued to multiply, casting an ever-growing shadow across the Martian skies, one question burned in the minds of everyone who understood the stakes. What would happen when 3I/ATLS finally reached its destination? As the days passed and 3I/ATLS inched closer to Mars, the situation spiraled into a level of global urgency not seen since the dawn of the space age. Every hour brought new data, new theories, and new fears. In the world's most secure laboratories and control rooms, sleep became a luxury.
Teams of scientists worked in rotating shifts, poring over streams of information pouring in from orbiters, telescopes, and deep space monitors. The multiplying objects, now numbering in the thousands, had formed intricate patterns around Mars. Some clustered tightly together, while others spread out in delicate spirals that looked eerily like the arms of galaxies. At first, these formations seemed random, but advanced AI analysis revealed something disturbing. The configurations were evolving, changing in a way that resembled learning behavior. The swarm wasn't just growing in size, it was becoming more complex, as though it were adapting to its environment. For planetary defense experts, this was their worst nightmare. If the swarm truly possessed adaptive intelligence, then traditional mitigation strategies like deflecting an asteroid or redirecting a comet would be useless. You can't predict the actions of something that thinks, especially when its motives are utterly alien. Inside NASA, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory became the epicenter of activity. Conference rooms overflowed with experts from every imaginable field: astrophysics, computer science, xenobiology, cryptography, and even anthropology. It was no longer just a question of what these entities were, but why they were here and what their appearance signified for the future of the solar system. Among the most alarming discoveries came from a joint NASA-ESA analysis team. By modeling the swarm's trajectories using advanced orbital simulations, they realized that the objects weren't merely hovering around Mars by chance. Instead, their movement suggested a deliberate strategy. They were gradually forming a shell around the planet, a network of interconnected clusters that, once completed, would effectively encase Mars in a loose, shifting web. The implications were terrifying. If this pattern continued, the swarm could gain total control over Mars's communication and observation pathways. Any signal sent from the planet's surface could be intercepted. Any spacecraft attempting to approach could be blocked or destroyed. In essence, Mars was being quarantined, or worse, claimed. The military ramifications were staggering. Governments quietly began mobilizing resources for contingencies they had never planned for. Spacefaring nations debated whether to launch armed probes or to develop specialized defense satellites. But there was a chilling realization: even the most advanced human technology might be centuries behind whatever force was behind these objects. To act rashly could provoke a response humanity wasn't prepared to face. As global leaders weighed their options, public awareness grew at an alarming rate. Amateur astronomers were now capturing clear images of the strange formations, and social media platforms exploded with speculation. Videos showing shimmering points of light near Mars went viral, accompanied by hashtags like Mars Swarm and Alien Comet. Conspiracy theories proliferated, ranging from claims of secret alien alliances to doomsday prophecies predicting Earth's imminent invasion. The carefully constructed narrative of routine comet monitoring began to crumble. NASA and other agencies faced mounting pressure to disclose the truth. Yet, even as they prepared to release a carefully curated statement, a catastrophic leak occurred. A whistleblower within a European space agency uploaded classified images and trajectory data to a decentralized file-sharing network. Within hours, the world saw undeniable proof: a swarm of mysterious objects encircling Mars in complex, unnatural formations. The public reaction was instantaneous and explosive. Stock markets plummeted as investors grappled with the potential economic fallout. Religious leaders issued statements ranging from hopeful proclamations of cosmic kinship to dire warnings of divine judgment. Protests erupted in major cities, with demonstrators demanding full transparency and immediate action. In some countries, panic buying emptied store shelves as people braced for an uncertain future. Behind closed doors, the situation grew even direr. Analysts reviewing the whistleblower data noticed something that had been overlooked in the chaos. Embedded within the swarm's movements was a subtle rhythm, a repeating pulse that seemed to emanate from a central point. When this pulse was translated into visual form, it matched the earlier decoded signal, a three-dimensional map of the solar system, with Mars at its center. This revelation sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The swarm wasn't just broadcasting a message, it was physically embodying it, using its own configuration as a living signal. Whatever intelligence controlled these objects was operating on multiple levels of communication simultaneously, far beyond anything humans had ever encountered. Theories reached a fever pitch. Some researchers suggested that Mars might hold an ancient relic or structure that the swarm sought to protect, or perhaps to activate. Others speculated that the planet itself was the key, its unique geology or atmosphere serving as a catalyst for some interstellar process. A few dared to voice the most unsettling theory of all, that the swarm was preparing Mars not for colonization, but for transformation. As these debates raged, a new and terrifying development occurred. Several of the objects began to emit bursts of concentrated energy, detectable across a wide range of wavelengths. These emissions were unlike any natural phenomenon ever recorded. They weren't random flares or radiation spikes. They were controlled, targeted, and increasing in frequency. The bursts caused havoc with Mars's fragile atmosphere, triggering localized storms and strange auroral displays that lit up the sky in haunting shades of blue and violet. Rovers on the surface recorded dramatic footage of swirling dust devils and sudden electrical discharges, phenomena that defied existing meteorological models.
Even more alarming, these energy bursts began to interfere with human technology. Communication with the Perseverance rover became erratic, with signals dropping out for minutes or even hours at a time. Orbital assets reported strange glitches and power fluctuations. It was as if the swarm were testing humanity's systems, probing for weaknesses. At this point, the international coalition overseeing the crisis reached a breaking point. A secret emergency summit was held, attended by the world's most powerful leaders and scientific minds. The meeting took place at an undisclosed location, shielded from surveillance and outside interference. During the summit, intelligence agencies presented their most chilling projection yet. If the swarm continued to multiply at its current rate, it would achieve total planetary coverage within 37 days. At that point, any attempt to intervene would be virtually impossible. Mars would be completely sealed off, its surface hidden beneath a veil of alien activity. The coalition faced an impossible choice. They could attempt a preemptive strike, risking catastrophic retaliation, or they could do nothing, allowing the swarm to complete whatever unknown process it had begun. Neither option offered any guarantee of survival. As debate raged, a small group of scientists proposed a radical alternative. By carefully analyzing the swarm's encoded signals, they believed it might be possible to send a counter-message, a kind of linguistic handshake that could establish rudimentary communication. If the swarm was truly intelligent, perhaps it could be reasoned with, or at least delayed. The idea was controversial, to say the least. Some feared that sending a message would reveal too much about humanity's capabilities and vulnerabilities. Others argued that failing to respond would be interpreted as hostility. In the end, desperation won out. The coalition approved a plan to construct a powerful transmission array, capable of sending a signal strong enough to reach the swarm. As engineers worked around the clock to build the array, tension reached a breaking point. Religious extremists claimed that humanity was attempting to talk to demons, staging violent protests against the project. Meanwhile, financial markets teetered on the brink of collapse, with entire industries paralyzed by uncertainty. Finally, the day came. The array was activated, and the carefully crafted message, an intricate sequence of mathematical and geometric patterns, was transmitted toward Mars. For several agonizing hours, there was no response. Scientists stared at their monitors, watching the swarm for any sign of reaction. Then, without warning, the entire formation shifted. The objects realigned themselves into a perfectly symmetrical structure, forming a massive ring around Mars. At its center, a single point of light flared brilliantly, brighter than any star in the sky. The swarm had answered. But the meaning of its response was far from clear. Was this a gesture of peace, a signal of acknowledgement, or a declaration of war? Before the scientists could analyze the data, a new crisis erupted. Space-based sensors detected a sudden surge of energy from 3I/Atlas itself. The comet's core, previously thought to be inert, was now radiating intense heat and electromagnetic interference. Even more disturbing, its velocity was increasing, as though some hidden force were propelling it directly toward Mars. This development threw every existing model into chaos. If 3I/Atlas collided with the planet while the swarm was active, the consequences could be apocalyptic. The impact might trigger a chain reaction, releasing unimaginable amounts of energy
and potentially destabilizing Mars's orbit, or even threatening Earth itself. Governments scrambled to prepare evacuation plans for orbital stations and to safeguard critical infrastructure. Military forces were placed on high alert. The world held its breath as humanity faced the most profound crisis in its history. Meanwhile, deep beneath the surface of Mars, seismic sensors detected something extraordinary. Faint but unmistakable vibrations echoed through the planet's crust, as though something ancient and immense were stirring. These signals, perfectly synchronized with the swarm's energy burst orbiting above, suggested a chilling possibility. The comet, the swarm, and Mars itself were part of a single, interconnected system. As this realization dawned, one final, terrifying question emerged. Was Mars merely a stage for these events, or was it the true focal point of an intelligence far older than humanity, now awakening to reclaim what was once its own? The seismic reading sent shockwaves through the scientific community, both figuratively and literally. What had been considered a dead, silent world was now resonating with a deep, rhythmic pulse, like the slow heartbeat of something ancient awakening beneath the Martian crust. At first, scientists dismissed the vibrations as tectonic activity triggered by gravitational stresses from 3I/Atlas's rapid approach. Mars was known to experience occasional Mars quakes, detected by the InSight lander during its operational years. But this was different. The signals were too precise, too regular, too perfectly timed to the swarm's energy bursts orbiting above. When the data was cross-referenced with historical records, an even more chilling discovery was made. Similar seismic patterns had been faintly detected decades earlier, long before 3I/Atlas was even discovered. They had been so weak back then that they were dismissed as noise. Now, amplified by the comet's arrival, they painted a disturbing picture. Something beneath Mars had been dormant for countless millennia, waiting for a trigger, and 3I/Atlas, and along with its mysterious swarm, was that trigger. As this realization took hold, panic began to spread among the top levels of leadership. Mars was no longer just a target or a battleground. It was an active participant in a process humanity couldn't comprehend. If the planet itself was part of an alien system, then Earth's safety was in even greater jeopardy than anyone had imagined.
Back on Earth, chaos reigned. News of the whistleblower leak and the unmistakable images of the swarm had sparked a wave of fear and fascination worldwide. Television networks aired constant coverage, while social media was flooded with theories, debates, and viral clips of the strange glowing formation surrounding Mars. Governments attempted to maintain order by releasing carefully crafted statements, but their reassurances rang hollow. Protest movements erupted in major cities, some demanding immediate disclosure of everything known about the swarm, others insisting that all space exploration be halted to avoid provoking whatever intelligence was behind it. Religious groups proclaimed the phenomenon as a sign of impending judgment or divine intervention, adding a spiritual dimension to the already volatile atmosphere. Amid this chaos, a secretive coalition of scientists, linguists, and AI specialists worked tirelessly to decode the swarm's communication further. The symmetrical ring formation that had appeared after the human transmission was believed to be a direct reply. Hidden within its structure was a new layer of encoded information. Through painstaking analysis, the team began to uncover its meaning. What emerged was astonishing and terrifying. The swarm's message appeared to describe a cycle, a repeating sequence of events spanning millions of years. At the center of the cycle was Mars, depicted not as a lifeless world, but as a kind of relay point, a hub in a network stretching across interstellar space. The comet, 3I-ATLAS, wasn't just a random interstellar visitor. It was part of this system, a delivery mechanism carrying materials or perhaps even entities from one star system to another. The swarm acted as both escort and catalyst, ensuring that the comet's cargo reached its destination. If this interpretation was correct, then humanity was witnessing a process that likely played out countless times before, long before humans ever walked the Earth. Mars was merely the latest stage in a chain reaction that could extend back billions of years.
As these revelations unfolded, the comet's behavior grew increasingly erratic. Instruments detected massive surges of energy emanating from its core, far beyond anything a natural body could generate. Its surface began to fracture, releasing clouds of exotic particles that defied known physics. Even more disturbing, fragments of the comet appeared to be separating and joining the swarm, as though the comet itself were alive, or at least partially constructed. The line between natural object and engineered machine blurred until it was no longer meaningful. Meanwhile, on Mars, the seismic activity intensified. Massive fissures opened across the planet's surface, some stretching for hundreds of kilometers. The swarm's energy bursts synchronized perfectly with these events, creating a global pattern that suggested coordination on a scale beyond comprehension. High-resolution imagery from orbiters captured breathtaking and horrifying scenes. Gigantic structures, previously buried beneath layers of dust and rock, were beginning to emerge. These formations were clearly artificial, their geometric precision impossible for natural geology to produce. Towers, domes, and vast lattice-like networks rose from the Martian surface, illuminated by eerie glows from the swarm above. For many scientists, this was the most significant discovery in human history, proof of an ancient, technologically advanced civilization on Mars. But the circumstances of its revelation left little room for celebration. It was becoming clear that these structures weren't simply ruins, they were functional components of a system that was now reactivating, perhaps as part of a defense mechanism or as preparation for an event yet to come. As these developments unfolded, the international coalition faced unprecedented decisions. With the comet's impact potentially only days away, every second mattered. Military leaders pushed for immediate strikes against both the swarm and the comet itself, arguing that humanity had no choice but to fight. Others cautioned that aggression could trigger a response far beyond Earth's capabilities to withstand. Adding to the urgency, new data suggested that Earth itself was not outside the system's influence. Subtle gravitational anomalies had been detected, indicating that the swarm's activities around Mars were beginning to affect the entire inner solar system. If left unchecked, these disturbances could destabilize planetary orbits over time, creating cascading effects that might doom all life on Earth. In the midst of this crisis, the team working on communication made a breakthrough. By combining linguistic models with advanced quantum computing algorithms, they succeeded in partially translating the swarm's latest message. The result was both illuminating and deeply unsettling. The message appeared to contain a warning, a description of a catastrophic event that had occurred long ago. The ancient Martian civilization had apparently reached a level of technological advancement rivaling the swarm's creators. In doing so, they triggered a chain reaction that led to their own destruction. The swarm had been sent to contain the aftermath, to ensure that whatever power had been unleashed would not spread beyond Mars. But there was a twist. The message also suggested that the containment was temporary. Over vast spans of time, the system required periodic resets, during which the comet would return to deliver new materials or reinforcements. Humanity, by exploring Mars and sending machines to its surface, had unknowingly disrupted the cycle. In essence, Earth's activity had awakened something that was never meant to be disturbed. This revelation sent shockwaves through the coalition. If true, it meant that the swarm's actions were not hostile in the conventional sense. They were following a protocol, a cosmic maintenance routine designed to prevent a greater disaster. But to human observers, that routine posed an existential threat.
As debates raged, events on Mars reached a dramatic climax. The swarm's ring formation contracted, forming a massive vortex above the planet's equator. Energy readings spiked to unprecedented levels, overwhelming sensors and causing widespread power outages across multiple orbital platforms. From this vortex, a beam of light erupted, striking the planet's surface with pinpoint precision. The impact site, located in the ancient region known as Valles Marineris, exploded in a cascade of red and gold light, visible even from Earth. In that moment, every system monitoring Mars went offline. Rovers, orbiters, and satellites, all silent. For several agonizing minutes, there was nothing but static. Then, slowly, data began to return. What it revealed left scientists speechless. The vast canyon system of Valles Marineris had changed. Entire sections of terrain had shifted, revealing a pattern that was unmistakably artificial. From orbit, it resembled a colossal symbol, its design too precise to be the result of random geology. The symbol matched one found in the decoded swarm messages, a representation of the cycle, with Mars at its center. Whatever process was unfolding, it had now entered its final stage. On Earth, chaos reached new heights. Markets collapsed entirely. Governments enacted martial law to maintain order. Riots broke out as people demanded answers that no one could provide. At the same time, the comet's acceleration continued to increase. Its trajectory now placed it on a direct collision course with Mars, with impact expected in less than 72 hours. The swarm's movements grew frantic, as if preparing for a monumental event. In a last desperate attempt to intervene, the coalition authorized a final transmission. This message was simpler than before, a universal plea for understanding, encoded in the most basic mathematical language possible. The transmission was sent. For a brief moment, the swarm seemed to pause. Its chaotic movements slowed, then stopped entirely. The ring structure dissolved, replaced by a single, unified formation hovering directly above Mars' surface. Then, as in response, the comet's acceleration ceased. Instruments detected a sudden stabilization of its trajectory, as though some immense force had counteracted its momentum. Release swept through mission control centers worldwide. Perhaps, against all odds, communication had been established. Perhaps the disaster had been averted. But that hope was short-lived. New readings revealed that while the comet had stopped accelerating, it had not stopped moving. Instead, it was now hovering above Mars, held in place by forces beyond human understanding. The swarm began to merge with the comet, its countless objects dissolving into streams of light that flowed into the comet's fractured surface. The process resembled a transfer of energy, or information. Moments later, a final burst of light engulfed the entire planet. When it faded, Mars was transformed. The once familiar red world now shimmered with alien colors, its surface covered in intricate networks of glowing lines. Vast regions of terrain have been reshaped into geometric patterns visible even from Earth. The ancient system had completed its cycle. Mars was no longer just a planet. It was now a fully activated component of a machine that spanned the stars. On Earth, silence reigned. Humanity had witnessed the birth, or rebirth, of something beyond comprehension. And as telescopes turned toward the heavens, a new and even more terrifying realization emerged. From the depths of interstellar space, other comets, other 3-eye-like objects were beginning to move. The cycle had only just begun. The silence following Mars transformation was almost unbearable. Every mission control room, every laboratory, and every secret military bunker fell into stunned stillness as the magnitude of what had just occurred began to sink in. For the first time in history, humanity had witnessed a deliberate reconfiguration of an entire planet, not through natural processes, but through the intervention of an advanced alien intelligence. The once dusty, barren red planet now pulsed with a strange, otherworldly light. Its surface was covered in intricate networks of glowing lines stretching for thousands of kilometers, glowing faintly like a neural network. Cities, valleys, and craters had been reshaped into geometric designs that seemed to serve a purpose no human could decipher. From orbit, the geometric patterns looked eerily similar to circuits on a computer chip. Mars had been converted into a functioning component of a colossal machine,
a machine whose purpose was still unknown. As the initial shock began to fade, the world's top scientists scrambled to interpret the data streaming in from the few surviving satellites. The readings were unlike anything ever recorded. Massive energy flows cycling through the Martian crust, precise pulses resonating at intervals measured in nanoseconds. It was as if Mars itself had been switched on. The implications for Earth. On Earth, panic reached a fever pitch. The collapse of global stock markets was total, with entire economies falling into chaos. Martial law was declared in over 30 countries. In major cities, riots erupted as terrified populations tried to flee to safe zones, though no one truly knew where safety could be found. Religious leaders across the globe claimed the event was a fulfillment of ancient prophecies, while scientific organizations tried desperately to calm the public with rational explanations. Neither side had the full truth, and both fueled confusion and fear. Governments formed a joint emergency council to manage the crisis. Their first priority was to determine whether Earth was next in the cycle. The decoded fragments of the swarm's earlier messages suggested that Mars was only one stage in a much larger system, a network that spanned multiple worlds. The terrifying possibility emerged. If Mars had been activated, Earth could be next. Astrophysicists turned their attention to the strange objects now appearing beyond the solar system. Telescopes detected dozens, perhaps hundreds of new interstellar bodies moving toward the inner planets. Each resembled 3i-like Atlas, traveling at impossible speeds. If even a fraction of them reached Earth, the consequences would be unimaginable.
Inside the Coalition's command center. Inside the Coalition's underground command facility, a group of the brightest minds on the planet worked around the clock. Their mission was clear: decipher the swarm's true purpose and find a way to prevent Earth from being drawn into the same fate as Mars. Dr. Amina Navarro, the astrophysicist who had first identified the swarm's artificial patterns, stood at the center of the operations hub. Exhausted but unyielding, she addressed the room of generals, diplomats, and scientists. "We've been thinking about this the wrong way. The swarm isn't an enemy fleet. It's a maintenance system. Mars wasn't destroyed, it was prepared. It's now a functioning part of a network that spans interstellar distances. If Earth is next, we have two options: integrate willingly or resist and risk annihilation." A heated argument broke out. Military leaders demanded immediate action to destroy the incoming comets, even if it meant launching nuclear weapons into space. Scientists warned that such aggression could provoke a catastrophic response. Dr. Navarro presented a third possibility: communication. "We've already established partial dialogue with the swarm. If we can decode the rest of their messages, we might convince them that Earth's integration should be delayed or even stopped. But we have less than 72 hours before the first new comet arrives. If we fail, the cycle will begin on Earth." The final decoding. Using advanced quantum algorithms, the team worked tirelessly to crack the swarm's language. After 2 sleepless days, they succeeded. The message they uncovered changed everything. The swarm's creators were not conquerors. They were archivists. Their purpose was to preserve civilizations at the brink of collapse by integrating their worlds into a massive interstellar network. Millions of years ago, Mars had been home to a thriving, technologically advanced species. But their reckless experiments had destabilized their planet's ecosystem, threatening to unleash a chain reaction that could have destroyed the entire solar system. The swarm had been sent to save what remained of Martian civilization by transforming the planet into a stable, machine-like archive, a storage hub for knowledge, culture, and genetic material. The cycle was not about destruction, it was about preservation. But to the species being integrated, the process would appear indistinguishable from annihilation. Dr. Navarro said, "We think they're saving us. To them, this is mercy." A desperate gamble.
Armed with this understanding, the coalition devised a bold plan. If they could send a message demonstrating that humanity was still capable of preventing its own collapse, perhaps the swarm would delay Earth's integration. Using every satellite and transmission array on the planet, they prepared a single unified broadcast, a representation of Earth's scientific achievements, cultural diversity, and ongoing efforts to solve global crises. The message concluded with a plea encoded in the swarm's own language. "We are not ready to be archived. Give us time." The broadcast was sent. For several agonizing hours, there was no response. The swarm structures around Mars continued their pulsing activity, seemingly indifferent to Earth's plea. Then, just as hope was fading, the comet above Mars emitted a burst of light so intense it temporarily blinded sensors across the solar system. When the light faded, the swarm's formation had changed. The ring structure dissolved, replaced by a single vast symbol, a symbol identical to the one humanity had transmitted as their final message. Dr. Navarro whispered, tears in her eyes, "We heard us." The decision. The comet's trajectory shifted. Instead of continuing toward Earth, it altered course, moving outward toward the edge of the solar system. The swarm followed, leaving Mars behind, but maintaining its network structures on the planet. A final transmission was received, a message so simple that even non-specialists could understand it. It contained only two symbols, a circle and a spiral. Dr. Navarro interpreted it for the council. The circle means completion, the spiral, continuation. They've decided to leave us alone, for now. But the cycle hasn't ended. They'll return, someday. The world reacts. As news of the narrow escape spread, Earth erupted in a mix of relief and dread. While the immediate threat had passed, humanity now understood its place in a vast cosmic system. The knowledge that an ancient, incomprehensibly advanced intelligence was watching weighed heavily on every mind. Religions adapted, governments restructured, and scientific priorities shifted overnight. Massive efforts began to strengthen Earth's defenses, not against invasion, but against its own self-destruction. The ruins on Mars became a focal point for exploration. A permanent human outpost was established to study the alien technology and learn from the mistakes of the civilization that came before. Yet beneath the optimism lay an unshakable fear. The swarm's message had been clear. This was only a delay. The final twist. Months later, deep space telescopes detected movement at the edge of the galaxy. A cluster of new comets was emerging, traveling in perfect formation toward another star system, one hundreds of light years away. For now, Earth was safe, but somewhere out there, another world was about to face the same choice: resist integration or become part of the network. As Dr. Navarro gazed up at distant lights, she whispered, "We've been given a second chance. The question is, what will we do with it?" The screen faded to black with a single haunting message. The cycle never ends. If you were captivated by this incredible journey through space and time, don't let it end here. Like this video to help others discover it, share it with someone who loves science and mystery, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next mind-blowing discovery. The universe is full of secrets, and together, we'll uncover them one story at a time. Stay curious, because the next mystery is just beyond the stars.